Christ in Los Angeles. Anybody from Los Angeles?
Yeah.
From Los Angeles. There we go. All right, you got some backup in here today. Okay. In Los Angeles, under the leadership of late Dr. A.M. Poe, Senior Sprewell preached his first message at the age of 6 and was said to be among the youngest to be ordained in the Church of God of Christ. An extremely gifted minister with a passion for souls, his practical approach and precise prophetic ear causes him to be a regular guest on the Word Network, BET, Daystar, just to name a few. Also, he's an anointed psalmist. He recently released a debut album entitled Gary Sprewell, Churching with Friends. Let's give Elder Sprewell a round of applause. Mayor Sean Patterson Howard. She is the mayor of the city of Mount Vernon in New York. Mayor Sean Patterson Howard is the 28th mayor of the city of Mount Vernon, New York, serving the people of this historic Westchester community as the first woman in this capacity since her inauguration in 2020. A somewhat reluctant politician, Mayor Patterson Howard relies on collaboration and partnership on every level to address everyday issues and major crises from COVID-19 pandemic to food insecurity and infrastructure failures and gun violence to set Mount Vernon on a path to growth, resilience, sustainability, and true governance. Though Mayor Patterson Howard continues her family's legacy of being the first woman and person of color appointed President and Chief Executive Officer for Yonkers Family YMCA in New York, the first elected woman mayor in the city's 200-plus year history, and the first African-American woman and woman of color mayor in the county of Westchester, New York, in New York's history, she has no desire to be the only and paves the way for those beside her and behind her. She also currently serves as the president of the African American Mayors Association, which we have a great partnership with. Thank you and welcome to And I'll introduce our moderator for this morning. Mr. Bakari Sellers is a two-time New York Times best-selling author, civil rights activist, attorney, entrepreneur, legislator, and overall prolific voice of the culture. Bakari Sellers continues to build upon the legacy he inherited as a son of Gwendolyn Sellers and civil rights leader Cleveland Sellers. While his dad helped shape the movements working alongside Stokely Carmichael, Bayard Rustin, and Malcolm X, Bakari has come into his own, helping to write the blueprint for today's movement with the likes of Representative James Clyburn, Attorney Benjamin Crump, and President Barack Obama. A CNN analyst, Bakari also brings the ability to elevate discourse such that people always feel one step closer to the solution or resolution after he speaks. He combines these and many other talents in his new podcast, the Bakari Sellers Podcast, which airs 2 times a week on the Ringer Podcast Network. Sellers has also been an attorney with the Storm Law Firm LLC in Columbia, South Carolina since 2007, where he heads up the firm's strategic, commission, and public affairs team and the DEI consulting practice. Without further ado, let's give all of our panelists a round of applause.
Everybody get it? Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
We got party all night long last night. It's dragging, so good morning.
Good morning.
I am from the big city of Denmark, South Carolina, where we have 3 stoplights and a blinking light. My mom and dad always tell me the 2 most important words in the English language are the words thank you. And they're not nearly said enough. I know we got some people who are from places that are not the South in this room. But in the South, we have this saying that we like to give people their flowers while they're living. With that being said, I have some friends on this panel, and I just want to say thank all of you all for the work and the sacrifice. This is a unique panel where you have elected officials and pastors, scholars and business people who are all up here together for one singular cause and a common good. wanted to say thank you to them, but even more importantly, I'm not sure you all understand the talent that you all have in your midst with Dr. Courtney Johnson Rose. Anytime you have a woman who is as powerful as she is, leading an organization with as much power and even more growth potential as this one, you have to sometimes simply say thank you in what is relatively a thankless job. So thank you so much. I'm going to level set this conversation and not try to speak too long before we kind of delve into the topic of the day. I was thinking a lot about what I would say to this August body in this amazing city at this particular time. And for me, it was very easy to kind of level set and formulate where we're going in this discussion, because we're sitting here in Black History Month. We're sitting here on a day that we celebrate all the heroes and heroines on whose shoulders we stand upon. And so I just wanted to toss out a few names to you, so you know why you're in the seats that you're in. I think back to a young man named George Elmore. He was, in 1946, he was so fair-skinned that he could pass for being white. And George was what they called a Renaissance Negro. Because in 1946, he owned a 5 and dime store, liquor store, drove a cab, and took pictures on the side. George decided he was going to try to register to vote in 46. Y'all know who the nosiest people in all of American society is. I know these two know. They're called poll workers. I think that is part of the prerequisite to being a poll worker. You got to be nosy as hell. The poll workers looked at George in August of that year when he went to cast his ballot, and they said, "We know you're a Negro, you can't vote here." But George was filled with audacity and faith, and he filed his suit. It was called Elmore versus Rice. But as soon as he filed it, they firebombed his liquor store, stopped distributing to his 5 and dime store. His wife literally died in a mental health hospital from having to undergo the trauma of the cross of being burned on her yard, etc. But Elmore versus Rice is the reason that African Americans can vote in primaries throughout this country. So ask yourself as you sit in these chairs in this particular moment, I think you all should write down one question, and Pastor, you can steal it for your Sunday morning sermon. But you should ask that very simple question of how far have we come? I think as you all sit in these chairs, as you all do the work that you do, as you drink the good liquor in the bar downstairs, and you are focused on how to be a better husband or better wife, how to be a better realtor, how to be a better sister, how to be a better citizen, you gotta ask yourself that simple question. I think about Sarah Mae Fleming, who's my favorite woman in all of the books that we read. She was a 22-year-old domestic worker. She had just gotten off work from cleaning up a hotel when she and her girlfriend sat down on the bus. Story sounds familiar, but see, Sarah's sin wasn't sitting at the front of the bus. Her sin was when the bus driver told her to get off, she went out the front door, the white shoes, instead of the back door, the colored shoes. Then the bus driver grabbed her by the neck, punched her in the stomach, and rolled her down the steps. Sarah was unique because as you sit in these chairs, remember this as well, she wasn't looking to make history that day, but history found her. It reminds me of the book of Isaiah, and I'm the furthest thing from a pastor. NAREB can testify. I think he's seen me drink tequila. I ain't nowhere near nobody's pastor, but it does remind me of the book of Isaiah when Isaiah was in the full honor and glory of the Lord, and the question was asked, "Who shall go for me?" And Isaiah said, "Oh Lord, y'all are terrible." They done party, they done dated for the Bible study Wednesday night.
Send me. Send me, Lord.
What you said? Tell me, preach. No. Here am I, Lord, send me. Sarah wasn't looking to make history that day, but instead history found her, and she said, "Here am I, Lord, send me." She joined with some young enterprising lawyers from the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and Sarah Mae Fleming laid in foundation and action and law for another young lady who sat down some 18 months later named Rosa Parks. So again, ask yourself that very simple question. How far have we come? Last but not least, before I turn it over to my good friend, I'm gonna let Keita talk first, because we know that man beside you can show enough talk, but we're gonna get to the question first. I also think about Harriet and Eliza Briggs. And Harriet and Eliza Briggs were parents of young black children in Little Clarion County, South Carolina. They wanted their kids to have access to school buses. And And so they filed this lawsuit. It was known as Grigsby Elliott. It was the first case filed in the landmark collection case known as Brown versus Board of Education. Brown was actually started in South Carolina. Chief Justice Warren got a very rare unanimous opinion in which he held that segregation causes a sense of inferiority by placing children in environments not conducive to learning. And if we look around our communities now, ask yourself as we talk about building wealth, how far have we come? And I think about George Elmore, I think about Sarah Mae Fleming, think about Harriet and Eliza Briggs, and I think about the fact that we still live in communities where kids go to school where their heating and air don't work, where their infrastructure is falling apart. Where those women who sit in the front row of the churches and they wear those big hats and they use a full stick of butter to make their coconut pies. And you smell like Chanel No. 5 all day long. They use a little word as original, but when they go home, they have to make the decision about whether or not they're going to get their prescription drugs or pay their utility bills. You know, I think about the fact that Sarah Mae Fleming, all she wanted was access to public transportation, but now we live in communities where people don't have access to public transportation or affordable housing or even clean water. What if I told you there were 100 cities in the United States that have less potable water than Flint, Michigan? And so as I look at my friends, the Floyds, I've actually been on TV. I just wrote a book entitled The Moment. It comes out April 23rd. And you're prominently featured in the book because I talk about the moment we were on TV together. And that man had me crying. I'm talking about ugly crying. I'm on TV at 6:30 in the morning. He was on with Ben. It was after his brother was murdered in front of our eyes. And I had to hear his pain in his voice. And then I came on with Dante Stallworth, and John Berman had the audacity to ask me, how am I feeling? And I could just feel my children sleep in the rooms around the house, and I didn't know what I was going to tell them because we all felt like their family at that time. And ever since that moment, you and I have been family. And so, Keith, I'm going to start with you and then pass it to him to your right. And just kind of, since 2020, answer that big question of how far have we come? Talk about the progress, because I fear that the racial reckoning we thought was happening actually didn't. And the progress we thought we were making actually slipping away.
First and foremost, thank you for standing alongside with us throughout this moment in time. It's a movement. For us, nothing has changed. We have said before Congress, we have gone through meetings that, effortlessly trying to get policies changed, and nothing has changed for us. Unfortunately, members of Congress will sit around the round table with us, they'll support us, they'll tell us everything we want to hear, and then when we leave, it's a totally different story. And so Philonus and I have birthed the Philonus and Keita Floyd Institute for Social Change, because we feel like if our members in Congress are not going to hold themselves accountable, then we need to enter into our neighborhoods and go into these communities and bring about awareness. And that's what Philonus and I have been committed to doing over the past few years.
Talk about that. Talk about that work. I don't know if we're supposed to be telling all our secrets, but me, you, and Ben, we actually sat around the table. There's a fraternity that you all don't want to be a part of. You do not want to be a part of this fraternity, but we had the family of both of John. We had Alton Sterling's family. We had Eric Gardner's mother up there with us. We had Terrence Crutcher, his family up there as well. And we sat in a room with my United States senators. You remember that? Tim Scott and Lindsey Graham. They told you everything you wanted to hear. But talk about those efforts that you've been making, what it is to be in those rooms, talking about things like wealth or criminal justice reform, and the response that you're getting, and how you get knocked down but continuously get back up. And tell people also how you and your family are doing.
I want to thank God for just giving me the opportunity to be here today. My family, it's like a roller coaster ride. It's always up and down. But being inside of those rooms in the White House, speaking to different leaders that you won't have the opportunity to let them know, hey, we're looking to change. We've been fighting for the same thing for over 400 years. When are y'all gonna stop making us struggle, And we need to get out here and be in the forefront like you all. But the consideration of when we in there speaking, they'll be in one room, we'll tell them one thing, and then they'll go into a whole nother room, and then they'll say something totally different. And like Timothy Eugene Scott, when he was one of the men published by his full government. Y'all need to know that man's name, Timothy Eugene They gonna say your name. You know, that's something wrong. But all I'm saying is, my brother was murdered, and everybody seen it. This was something like a motion cinema picture that the world seen. And people stood up behind us. Even in Russia, they stood up behind us for what was going on. And the opportunity that we had to even change policies, nobody has changed anything. And we have people every day we can think about, from Harriet Tubman, and you can keep moving on up to Trayvon Martin, Dr. King, you can talk about Medgar Evers, all these people, we fought and fought and fought, and nothing has changed. So the bottom line, Mr. Bakari, he was there, and we're still in there doing the same thing. We just want to create change, you know. That's basically all I can say. My wife, she was with me by my side, and we stood up, and we just, Congresswoman, she was next to me. We all been thriving, trying to find a solution, but nothing has passed. So we just have to keep fighting.
To piggyback off of what the officer said, Bakari spoke to, the names of the families that we mentioned, had they passed those bills, the Georgia Justice and Policing Act, for example, when those family members lost their loved ones, we would be seeing a whole lot of difference going on. No chokeholds, police officers, no knock warrants, Breonna Taylor. You know, both Jean was sitting in the comfort of his home, and you have the police officer walk in, assuming that it was her home, murder him, and then she gets like so many years, 2 years, and then she's out on probation. So there's no accountability system, and everybody wants to say, oh, well, you know, the boys want to defund the police. No, we don't want to hold you accountable. Well, just like you want to go home to your families, we want our loved ones to go home to theirs, despite their circumstances.
One of the things that they're talking about is that one of the things that I say on TV sometimes that people don't necessarily grasp is that the price for black folks to have any type of change in this country is extremely high. And people are like, what does that mean, Bakari? Well, in order to get the 64, 65 Voting Rights Act, Civil Rights Act, people had to see us get our gay bus on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Weirdly enough, many of you all know this if you don't, but in order to have the Fair Housing Act of 1968, King had to be assassinated. In order for us to even talk about the Georgia Justice and Policing Act, the criminal justice reform, we had to see your brother be murdered. So the question I have is when can we have change in this country without black folk having to pay the price in blood? And I will shift the conversation to the mayor and former mayor here. I know you do a lot with Greek organizations as well. Mayor Ray or President Ray or President Dr. Mayor Ray. Whatever they call him these days. But I want to start with Mayor Sean Howard Patterson, who does great work up in Mount Vernon, and talk about many of the things and initiatives that you're seeing around building wealth in your particular area. It's the blackest city above the Mason-Dixon line. I learned that this morning. And also, you head a national organization that's of great import. Talk about that. And Mayor Ray, I want you to chime in from your experience as mayor, and then President Ray, I want you to chime in as your experience as president of everybody good?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay,
Do you have a
so,
mic? Do you have a mic? It's right there.
oh, okay. Sean Patterson, Howard, Mayor of Mount Vernon, New York. And if you knew hip hop or know hip hop, that's where Heavy D is from. And so we were cast as Money Earning Mount Vernon. And that's important, right? Because as I'm really trying to bring my community back to the place of money earning Mount Vernon, we must talk about black wealth. And so what we're doing in our community is we're about to cut the ribbon on our Financial Empowerment Center, where we're working with our residents around credit repair, working with our businesses and and also residents around accessing capital, because we know it's very difficult for black people to access capital, even when you have a good credit rating. We're trying to work with them on understanding the importance of having their houses properly appraised. When we're trying to sell our houses, it's very difficult for us to get the proper appraisal, and so oftentimes we're selling our houses for a lower amount. So we're working on proper appraisals. We're working on reevaluating the values of our home and our community through our assessor's office, because they have not been done so in a long time. We're partnering with different financial institutions to work around first-time homeowner programs. We have almost 8 to 10% of the properties in our community are eligible for foreclosure from the city. Now, we don't know how many of those properties are eligible for foreclosure from the bank, but that's a scary number because, as we stated, we are the blackest city north of the Mason-Dixon line, 22 minutes on a metro rail from Grand Central Station, and we have people walking around our community with suitcases of cash looking to buy our houses that Big Mama never put in a will. And it went down to the person who was less able to continue to keep the house up. And because they didn't have to buy the house and work for the house, they don't understand the value of the house. So if you have a $500,000 to a $750,000 house and it's valued at that, and you don't even understand that it's valued at that because location in real estate, it might be an old house, but we have a good location, and someone offers you $100,000 and you got hungry babies, you're gonna take it. So we're also working on trusts and wills, because 30% of black people in this country do not have a will. And because we don't have a will, we do not pass our wealth and what we have accumulated from one generation to another. And so I'm a African American Mayors Association where there's over 500 black mayors. We are working with NAREB on a 100-city tour. Ours is April 13th. We're really excited about it because we will deal with black home ownership, proper property valuations, women in real estate, but also, and I'm gonna make this short because you said don't have a dinner conversation, I don't wanna get cut off. The African American Mayors Association is also working with the Gates Foundation. And the Gates Foundation has funded us to do an Economic Mobility Leadership Institute. And we have been focusing on all of those initiatives that I just spoke about across the country with our mayors, and making sure that our mayors are implementing the type of policies, bringing in the type of partnerships and programming that is going to support those understand the importance of generational wealth.
President of Barber Scotia College, president of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated, former mayor. I mean, first of all, we're praying for you. I hope you take care of yourself. Those are a hell of a job you got there. But talk about from your perch, holistically, about some of the things that we're seeing, some of the changes, and the importance of our HBCUs and our Greek letter organizations.
Sure. So first of all, thank you all for the invitation to sit with you all and to be on this amazing panel. I just want to comment on the mayor's statement about why it's so important that you know who your local elected officials are. So many folks don't recognize that the policies that are driven and impacted by us is really locally. And while you're worrying about who's going to be at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, you really need to understand what's going on in your local leadership, and whether you're in the county or whether you're in the city park. And I recall being exposed to affordable housing as a mayor. Initially when I got elected back in 2011, when I realized that there were people walking around the community with these suitcases of money, trying to buy property from individuals that had fallen into disrepair. And it was there that I learned about black developers and why it was important for us to make sure that we were at the table, and understanding that pooling our money together to be able to create our own investment zones, to be able to provide housing for our people mattered. And so it opened my eyes to what the possibilities could be as a mayor. Now you fast forward to being the president of Phi Beta Sigma. I mentioned this a little bit yesterday, but I remember when I ran for national president, they literally laughed at me when I said, hey guys, we should start looking at affordable housing as a fraternity. I mean, they laughed at me. They still elected me, but they laughed at me. And in 2 months, we're going to be working down on a 4-story affordable housing complex in Washington, D.C. Now what we're talking about, because now they see the vision, is now how we can leverage to be able to replicate this in multiple cities around the country. And what it does is it changes our revenue stream as an organization in the next 20 years, because here we're getting ready to build a $36 million asset that will be on our books. And now I'm gonna build 7 more of those across the country. And when it's all paid off and that revenue comes to us from the tax credits that we've now gotten involved in to deal with this, that's gonna be revenue that will now flow through our organization that will allow for us to expand our programming and our engagement. That's why the partnership with us and NAREB is so important, because I'm educating a new generation of members to understand the power of real estate. And here I am now, the president of an HBCU where the city is trying to take my property. Because we have fallen into disrepair, because 20 years ago we lost our accreditation, and of course it seems like God keeps on giving me these big jobs that I got to do. But in 7 months, we have positioned the college to where we are in negotiations right now to where we're going to pay off this debt that we owe to the city of Concord and transform this HBCU. The reason why I took this job was because I recognized the power of churning out individuals that will be educated in spaces that we need. And so I'm getting ready to stand up my own school of government. I'm getting ready to stand up a social justice center, because I know how important that is and why that's going to be critical. Understand the power of my business school focusing on real estate for my people. And so when we put in our packet for reaccreditation in October, I'm literally getting ready to reshape the landscape of what HBCUs are going to look like and what we're going to be offering our people. Because if you're not educated, if you're not playing, if you don't understand the rules of the game, you will get swallowed up. And so I'm trying to create a whole institution that is going to be teaching the rules to the game. And when they change the rules, we will be educated enough to change with them. That's the power of understanding education. And that's why I got into the game. That's why I got into the HBCU game.
You're doing great work. I appreciate you so much. I'm gonna come to Lenny McNeil, who is a great import on this panel, and also Jim Carr to kind of answer this. And I'm gonna go to my new best friend, the pastor on the end last, to give us a little sustenance, but also talk about the relationship between the church and the import of the church. Before I do that, though, how many people in this room are above the age of 25? Raise your hand.
Everybody.
Y'all giggling, wait till now. Keep it up. How many of y'all have wills? Keep your hands up. Okay, that's good. There's some around us who do not. And one of the things that we talked about that the mayor mentioned is estates and trusts and wills. That is the mechanism and vehicle whereby wealth is actually passed down. And if you ain't got one, and the state's doing it for you, then you end up with you talked about a city in disrepair, you talked about a school in disrepair. That's how you end up with a family in disrepair. And so make sure, and one of the things I want to do is that this ain't my organization, so the audacity of me giving y'all a challenge, but I would like 100% of the members of this organization nationwide to have their wills done and completed. Amen. You're in spaces that we can only dream of, where decisions are made to move millions or billions or even trillions of dollars in debt and credit. Talk about the things that you've seen change since the murder of George Floyd in 2020. Talk about some of the things that you think we need to do, and how do we build wealth from your perch in the room that you're in, because having your voice in those rooms is more powerful today than we can ever imagine. I know you probably don't see yourself as a civil rights activist per se, but that activism you do for people of color in those rooms, it means a great deal.
Well, there's no question. I think it's a responsibility. And also, I feel it's an obligation, to not only have a seat, but if there isn't a seat available, bring another one in there to make sure that things are being said. I guess the way that I would, first and foremost, you have to understand for us, this was 3 miles away from our headquarters office where that tragedy took place. So let's be clear about that. And immediately there was a response from our CEO. But I will tell you that it was quite personal, as you can imagine, from my point of view. And you know, there's a saying that, you know, to do something you've never done, you have to be willing to do something you never did. So immediately when we think about opportunities in this space, the whole conversation about wealth development, the whole conversation about home ownership, it became very evident immediately that the old way wasn't going to work. So what U.S. Bank did, and which was unprecedented, was a $100 billion commitment, and that is billion with a B, by the way. And those resources are going to be obviously dedicated into home ownership opportunities, small business opportunities, obviously affordable housing opportunities. All of that are the catalysts that are going to obviously impact our folks and our neighborhoods. But I think the real specific thing that I'm most proud of is we introduced Access Home. This was an initiative that was really built on the idea of kind of changing the paradigm, have it go in a different direction, recognizing, just to piggyback a little bit on what Brother Ray indicated, was about, you know, making sure that the education piece was in place, investing in the education, because quite frankly, if you think about the things that hurt us the most as a people, you know, was just the mere fact that we didn't know. We were hoodwinked, we were bamboozled, we were, whatever phrase you want to use, we didn't have the knowledge. So being in a position where we're now offering that training to get people up to speed, that makes us more knowledgeable. And you know what? When we have the knowledge, when we have the know-how, you know, our possibilities are endless. We wanted to make sure that we're going to the bare roots and getting to the young people. You know, Dinner Time Conversations was a program that we implemented in Little Rock, Arkansas with Keith Jackson. And that was an opportunity for us to get to these young people and have them talk to their parents about the importance of savings, understanding what a FICO was. I remember we had a young man who said, you know what, I'm not even worried about being rich. I'm not worried about being wealthy. I'm worried about having an 800 FICO score. And that's the kind of power we're trying to instill in our folks today, so that they can carry on and, of course, keep wealth in the family where it belongs.
That's a bad boy. I was worried about paying my student loans about it. But I digress. I hope you don't mind me calling you a scholar, but you are a resident expert on this panel. And talk about, I know you're going to present shortly after this, so don't spoil the moment, but talk about it as we talk build wealth and asking that big question of how far have we come. Some of the highlights from the report that can answer that question.
Sure. So it's an outstanding question, and you know, when you look at black home ownership, someone said to me not too long ago that they were lamenting that blacks had such a low home ownership rate, 45%. And I said, I wouldn't look at it all in the negative. It's amazing that we have any home ownership, because the level of discrimination against blacks just never ceases. And so many statistics bear that out. I mean, the home ownership gap between blacks and whites was lower in 1930 than it was today, than it is today. In 1970, just 2 years after the Fair Housing Law, so basically it was the same in 68, the gap in black-white home ownership was 23.8%. Today, it's 30. The home ownership rate is basically 3/4 for whites. We're at 45. We were at 49.1 in 2004. But that's because we were experiencing the foreclosure crisis and predatory loans long before the rest of American financial system. And so when it came time to the housing crisis, the banks and financial institutions that preyed upon disproportionately black households were bailed out. It could have been the homeowners bailed out, and that would have bailed out the financial institutions. But instead, the institutions were bailed out, and the homeowners were left over $7 million to go into foreclosure. So one of the things we have to ask ourselves is, how is it that in 2018, the homeownership rate for blacks actually dipped for a quarter, to the rate it stood in 1968. How is that? And the answer is, it's discrimination. Make no mistake about it. In the year 2000, I wrote a paper called Automation is Not Automatic. And I caution that if you are automating these systems and the systems are biased, then you will automate discrimination in a way that never could be done on an individual basis, and we have it happening today. The question was asked earlier about what can we do other than protest and talk to politicians. We can sue. Blacks have faced adverse impact discrimination on multiple levels by the federal housing agencies, not the least of which is loan level pricing, which charges financially vulnerable households a higher fee to access federal loans than it does households with higher incomes and higher credit scores. The question is, why do they do that? The answer is, there's no good reason for it. It's a lawsuit that has been waiting to happen ever since it was implemented, going all the way back to the financial crisis. There is no need and no justification for charging borrowers at the loan level. Pooling is the way the system worked for 50 years. Pooling is the way it should work today. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in my conversation. But I guess my point is, we are facing extraordinary levels of discrimination, including the use of outdated credit scores, which the federal agencies have known and have acknowledged for years, and yet they've continued to do it. There have been some changes, but those changes are so slow that our homeownership rate may be 40% before they're all implemented. So the bottom line is that we need to take action on the policy front. We need to take action on the activist front, community initiatives, but we also need to make better use of the courts and the concept of adverse impact discrimination, because the only reason our homeownership rate today is only marginally greater than it was in 1968 is because we have automation driving discrimination in a way that's harder to understand, and it is not blatant, but it is absolutely abhorrent. It hurts us, and it needs to come to an end.
We'll talk about many of the things that your church organization and church family is doing, and then, from your perch, nourishing spirits and souls on a daily basis. Answer that as we conclude. Answer that big question I pose, which is, how far have we come?
Yeah, well, first let me thank the President, Bishop Worsham, for this invitation. The Church of God in Christ is the largest Pentecostal organization in the world, with more than 6.5 million members. We're 116 plus years old in over 109 countries around the world. We're not a black church, but we're predominantly of color, our members. And the Church of God in Christ has always been at the forefront of the civil rights movement. We've always had a major part in addressing inequalities. In fact, Dr. Martin Luther King gave his last speech the night before he would be assassinated in our world headquarters, Mason Temple Church of God in Christ. Malcolm X had his funeral at Faith Temple Church of God in Christ in Harlem, New York, because no other church felt comfortable enough to have him to host that funeral there. And we have a current presiding bishop, Bishop James Rashid, who understands that somewhere between Dr. Martin Luther King and today, we've lost our footing in the civil rights movement. And he is committed to ensuring that the Church of God in Christ does all that we can to ensure that the largest African American Pentecostal organization in the world is at the table. Now, I don't know if you know, our presiding bishop, his family business, if you would, is real estate. So he understands real estate. He understands wealth building in the black community. However, we have got to change our approach. Somewhere, we started preaching this prosperity gospel, and by we I mean church period, and it's not really prosperity. Prosperity is not about what you got on your back or even in the bank. but it's about what you can build to leave to the next generation.
That's right.
And we have been shouting people for decades about the walls of Jericho falling, but that whole text is about the acquisition of property. It's about wealth building. And so we're extremely excited and grateful to the president and to NAREB for partnering, for allowing us to partner with you all on this 100 city tour to ensure that our people are educated, trained, and prepared, not just to get to heaven, but to leave something on earth before they get there. And so we're super excited about it. I feel like I'm the least of these great minds on the panel, but one of my responsibilities as the president of evangelism of the Church of God in Christ is not just to train, to mentor, and to license evangelists. There's some, probably 100,000 evangelists that I have leadership over, but one of the conversations that I'm bringing to the table is not just how well you can preach. It's just not about hermeneutics and hermeneutics, how well you can put together a sermon, but it's a holistic approach. I want to know, do you have a trust? I want to know as the president, do you have insurances? I want to know, do you own your property? Could you imagine if all 6.5 million members of the Church of God in Christ owned property?
Yes.
I'm scared to even ask how many of our members own their property. And so our presiding bishop is extremely excited about shifting the conversation because a lot of our churches do well with low-income housing, and a lot of our churches from an organizational perspective does well with wealth building, but some kind of way we've got to translate that to the local member. And it's not good enough for the church to own property and the member not. And so we're extremely excited about the potential of this partnership and how we can, I don't know how far we've come, but I believe by faith we can go further. Thank you.
So the African American Mayors Association, for the past few years, we've been working with Wells Fargo because we saw the disparity in their lending. But right now, we just pinned a letter to Congress and the Navy Federal Credit because with them, 75% of white people are being approved for home ownership loans. And more than half of black people are being rejected. Even when our incomes for our houses, for our homes, we have over $140,000 in income, we're still rejected for loans when white people have $62,000 in income. And so that is a great disparity. And we have to get to a place, and I don't want to be political, but sometimes it is political. Sometimes in order to be politically correct and speak to the masses, we homogenize and we water down our message. But God didn't call me to play a harp, He called me to blow a trumpet. And so I'm very apologetic, and we have to call a thing. And that's why some of the other people get respect, and that's why some other people get followed, because they say what they say. And if what we're saying is not reaching people, like they say the math isn't mathing, then we have to really look at our message and decide, are we telling the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth? Or are we trying to tiptoe around and not offending? But I'm offended that our home ownership rate is going down. I'm offended that our young professionals who are making more than they ever made before are not interested in home ownership. They want rooftop gardens and luxury apartment buildings. And so when we're looking at this younger generation who makes more than we've ever imagined to make, and they're saying I'm not interested in a home, we have to do something to also reach them. Because when they're 50 and you're still paying $4,000 to $5,000 a month for rent, and you're not, and you don't own anything, the conversation becomes different. So we have to be intentional, we have to be strategic, and we have to be unapologetic in building the partnerships that are necessary to move the needle forward. We cannot make excuses, and we cannot just talk about what the man is doing, but if we pull together our collective resources, we can move this needle. So thank you, NAREB, for your Black Wealth Building Tour. AMA is with you, we are partnering with you, and make sure whenever it comes to your cities that the right people are coming out, and that's all of the black people who need to build wealth.
Try not to offend any more art players.
I will absolutely not. Dr. Rose, I have one ask. Help me my institution that allows me to educate folks in this space. Help me do that so that there will be no excuse, and that you will know that there will be at least one institution that you can send folks through that will be educated in this space. Help me do that. Because what I tell my folks, no one's coming to save us but us. God has given me an opportunity to be the president of a college. Now, I wasn't even thinking about this 8 months ago. Here I am. And I'm asking my people to help me build a course that will educate my people in this space. And we at least will have a location for all our folks to run through, that they will get the necessary knowledge to be able to do this work. Help me.
Real quickly on that note, I just wanted to make it evident and clear that that is exactly what needs to transpire. If you think about the opportunities, I think about 8% of the loan originators nationally are Black. That's not enough. So, and obviously the percentages are even less when you think about the number of appraisers. So how do you fix that? Well, you have to, like I said earlier, do something you've never done. So very proud of the fact that we have introduced a training program that's never been done. You have to be willing to invest in these young people. It doesn't matter if they have experience, it doesn't matter if they have the background. We immediately said, you know what? They're not just gonna come knocking at our door. Let's go out and find these individuals and train them and teach them how to do this work. So we were able to do that from an originator standpoint. We were also able to do that from an appraiser standpoint. So it's those types of steps and those types of exercises that are going to have to take place. And hopefully it's something that catches on. So then it's not just one lender doing that. Perhaps all of them can start a training program and start an appraisal training program to make those contributions, so we have more people who look like us taking care of us.
So just very quickly, the comment on millennials, this is an opportunity for NAREB, because I just was at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and a young millennial, a very talented, very bright young woman said, well, young people, Blacks are just not interested in home ownership. You talk about all that wealth stuff, but it just doesn't happen for Blacks. And the problem with her perspective was she was saying, because they have seen so many Blacks financially exploited, that home ownership doesn't work. And that is surrendering to the financial exploiters and discouraging Blacks from wanting to build wealth because they've been successful at stealing it from us. And so this is a powerful tool for NAREB to reach out and help young Blacks understand home ownership is the #1 source of wealth in America. Even among those who own every other form of wealth, housing is the #1. And we are leaving ourselves out if we reject it. And I just wanted to say, it's not just because, yes, they like more amenities and really don't appreciate the economics. It's that they've seen parents, they've seen aunts, they've seen uncles, they've seen others get exploited. We need to show them how to get in the door that isn't exploitative, because when we go in the right door, we benefit the same as everyone else.
I think I'm probably the only millennial on the panel.
Oh, wait, I'm not that old. I'm not as old as the rest of them.
But let me say that this generation, my generation, is not just a fear of commitment and the desire not to have responsibility, but it's a lack of education. I didn't know what equity was until I purchased my first home. So it's not that we don't want to build wealth. Someone needs to teach us and take the time to show us that this is what half of the Old Testament. I'm the only preacher on the panel too, so I guess I got to talk. Half of the Old Testament is about acquisition of property. It's It's about land. And we're still fighting. Those are the Jews, by the way. They get it. Well, I don't know what's wrong with us. But we've not been taught. And that's why we're extremely excited. I reside in Mission Church of God in Christ. We're extremely excited about partnering with NAREB to educate our people. Educate the Church of God in Christ and those who we serve, because we're going to build some wealth once we understand the game that we're all playing.
Before I think you have one last comment.
Yeah,
I've been trying to take up an offering for 15 minutes.
this is the thing that I always want to, I've been telling my wife this for a while. I won't be a whole, like, academy. Basically, what I want to do is I want to help people be able to teach people plumbing, teach people how to be electricians, teach people HVAC, teach people how to drive 18 wheelers.
That's it.
Nothing in this room is going to get here without an 18 wheeler. I guarantee that. Nothing is going to get here without an 18 wheeler. It's coming from the shelves and it's coming to your house from there. You got to go to the store to get it. So you teach these people how to do that. I guarantee they be building everything for NAREB 24/7. Plain and simple.
So I just want to say it's been an honor to be here in this room with so many amazing, brilliant people who are looking forward and forward thinkers. You know, for this organization, one of the reasons your president is so dope is because it's not really about what this organization was. It's not about what this organization is. It's really about what this organization can be. And a lot of times we get caught in what we were and what we are, and we lose sight of a vision going forward. So I want to end where I began, which is to simply say thank you. My name is Bakari Sellers. The moment, shameless plug, comes out April 23rd, pre-order today. But thank you guys for your love and support, and we'll turn it back over.